This video will look at the S-curve as related to innovation. In fact, in our study of business, we often encounter S-curve type of analyses. For example, the introduction of a new product into the market may initially be met with almost indifference. Later on, it becomes popular and then it declines. And if we plot out the sales over a period of time, we may find it approximates to an S-curve. We find this type of analysis, as I said, in many areas in business. But the one we're going to deal with here is related to innovation. We're going to look at the introduction of an innovative event, a new product, a new machine, a new piece of technology, a new way of working, whatever it is. We're going to look at the introduction of this innovative event or innovative object or whatever it is, and we're going to look at the returns on it, and we'll find that the returns, we can imagine the returns at least to follow this S-curve shape. So let's talk our way through it, and first of all look at the S-curve and see what it looks like. Well, no surprise, it does look like an S, albeit to one side, but there is an initial period on the left hand side that's rising, then it goes through a very rapid increase in the center, and then it starts to decline towards the right hand side. And this particular diagram is showing the relationship between performance and time. So the performance of this particular innovation will increase over a certain period of time, then it will increase very dramatically in the center, and then its performance will taper off towards the top end. At the very bottom, there are major technical obstacles to the innovation. The technical obstacles could be personnel need retraining on how to use a piece of equipment, or the piece of equipment needs to be integrated into a production process that involves other pieces of technology. So it needs to be combined and fitted in so it runs smoothly within the organization and within the production process. But there are various obstacles that need to be overcome when we anticipate purchasing and implementing a new technology. And those are set out at the start of the curve towards the left, as indicated. Towards the top, the technology approaches a physical limit. Machines have physical limits. There's a capacity limit, the most they can produce. Technologies can reach maximum efficiency. Well, you can't go past that. It's the maximum, after which it just tapers off. It may run at a very high level for a long period, but inevitably it'll wear out and it'll have to be replaced. So, in regards to innovation management, well, the S-curve model plays a key role in understanding the course of the innovation process in industries. This curve is talked about in the context of innovation. It's widely understood. It's introduced at some stage when obstacles are overcome and it's integrated into the working practices of the business. As workers become more skilled, more adept at working with the equipment, output increases dramatically, and eventually it starts to taper off. It reaches capacity. It can't go further. The model illustrates the introduction, growth, maturation, and decline of innovations. It shows the growth, the introduction at the start, the starting bit. Let's say it's a piece of machinery. It's purchased at a particular moment in time. That's its introduction. Then its growth. It starts to grow in terms of its performance. in terms of its contribution, it grows. Then it reaches maturity. In other words, it can't produce more. It's working at key efficiency. After which it declines. It starts to wear out. It starts to have problems in integrating with other pieces of equipment. As the other pieces of equipment are updated, this particular machine starts to look like it's suffering. It's not keeping up. It's falling behind. So it's declining. And that's what gives us this S shape. The model can be used for a range of innovations. However, its initial development was for technology innovations. But we can imagine this type of situation covering a whole range of activities within industry. It also can be applied in the context of some marketing situations, as I suggested earlier. The S-curve type of analysis crops up in many areas, and it's worth looking at. In economic theory, explaining the law of diminishing returns, and the production function, as it's called in economics, follows essentially the same shape. It's a sigmoid curve. The early stages of an innovation required large amounts of investment, capital and resources in order to develop the new technology. So the entrepreneur, looking at whether to innovate or not, must try to work out what the return on the investment will be. Well, in the early stages, as we can see here, the performance won't be much. The performance won't be great at the early stages. Very low performance from the piece of equipment. So therefore, the return on the investment will be very low at the start. And this may influence the entrepreneur in whether to buy it or not, whether to acquire this piece of technology. But later on, as output increases dramatically towards the center, as we can see, then of course the return on the investment would be significantly improved, and there'd be a bigger return to the entrepreneur. So in deciding whether to acquire this piece of technology or not may reside in the mind of the entrepreneur, of the innovator, who may be looking towards returns, monetary returns on the investment, and may be put off by the low anticipated returns at the start, but may also have to factor in the longevity of the investment. How long will this innovation last? When will it have to be phased out and a new one brought in? What's the calendar time? How many months or years will it last? The starting stage requires these investments. However, innovation and product performance will be limited at the early stages, which is what I was just saying. The returns on the investment at the start will be very low because the performance is low at the start. The innovation hasn't properly been bedded in. It's not properly working at the start. It has to be integrated with the other pieces of equipment and the other processes. However, as knowledge and awareness about the innovation grows, then there is a visible increase in innovation progress. Over a period of time, the employees will become more familiar with the equipment, know what it can do, know how it fits together, they're more comfortable with it. It becomes more efficient, it's more a part of the system. It almost ceases to be the new piece of innovation. It becomes part of the overall package of technologies that are employed to make the product or generate the outcome. So the center stage of the S-curve, the part that's almost vertical, that's when the entrepreneur will expect the biggest return. And then the returns will continue to grow, but they're growing at a declining rate. Eventually, we haven't shown it on this particular diagram, but eventually this piece of equipment will have to be replaced. We'll come on to that later. The technology innovation continues to grow once major obstacles are overcome. So the technology, the innovation, the performance tends to grow over a period of time, and of course the return on the investment will start to grow as well. Overcoming obstacles allows the innovation to grow, and when the innovation reaches a certain adoption rate, then there is exponential growth. Now, I don't mean that in a mathematical sense. I mean it more in almost a literal sense, or a literary sense, or a metaphoric sense, maybe. I'm not too sure which one to reach for here. But I don't mean we're going to sit down and measure it mathematically, but it does mean that there's a center portion here where there will be a very large increase in output. Once the obstacles are overcome, the obstacles to settling in the investment, settling in the innovation, getting the piece of equipment, getting it running, getting it sorted out, getting it integrated with the rest. Once all of that's sorted, those obstacles are overcome, then output should start to increase, and increase quite dramatically. That's why the equipment is there. But after a while, they can, in a sense, squeeze more out of it, more output from the technology, but it's at a diminishing rate. It starts to slow down, and that gives us the top part of the curve, the falling off part. Incremental innovation in this stage will yield investment and expand growth performance. So in the center, there will be a lot of growth performance. The performance index will be very high. The organization will experience rapid growth. But then after that, it starts to decline. All innovations at some stage of their lives will arrive at a physical limit. Every piece of capital has got a physical limit. It can't produce more than the maximum. I know that sounds somewhat odd, but it can't. The maximum is the maximum. And once it's reached some capacity limit, it can't go further. Now, if the organization needs further production, it could duplicate and get 2 of these machines. Or it could perhaps get rid of this one and get the latest technology with extra functionality, extra reliability, but also greater capacity. So there is a replacement of the particular machine. At the very top, the innovation struggles to sustain their market position and competitiveness, and they will eventually die out. So at the very top, the organization is struggling to get extra output to meet market demand. So markets may be lost to competitors. With the decline of the markets, the organization starts to come under pressure. There's a reduced profitability, and eventually the organization as a whole may suffer. So the innovation may struggle to generate more output at some level, right towards the very top. It can't get more output. So it's reached a maximum. In fact, we could imagine this curve dipping down, because as a machine is used intensively, it tends to break down. So it may be, in a sense, offline. It may not be producing for some time. So we could imagine the curve coming downwards later on. I haven't drawn it like that, but it could do. It could start to fall down. So at the very top, the organization is fixed in terms of what it can produce. Its competitors may produce more. They may take extra amounts of the market, particularly if the market is buoyant and growing. So they will have an easy time selling in the market. This particular company will not be able to produce more. The machine is at full capacity. It has to live with this or go for a replacement, invest in an alternative. The framework further implies an additional S-curve which reinforces another innovation to supplement the existing innovation. And that's what I said earlier. It could be that the company simply duplicates, gets a second machine. They have an expertise in using this one, so having a second one the same would fit in easily. But more than likely, they'll want extra functionality, extra ability of a bigger machine to try and boost the output. So we can look at it in terms of this diagram, not one S-curve, but two S-curves. We have, in this case, ferment, takeoff, maturity, and discontinuity. I'll explain what I mean by those in a moment. But here we have the first one. When it reaches maturity, that's it. The company can't produce more with that particular technology. So it buys into a second technology, a better technology. But of course, it has to get it started. It has to get it set up, get it integrated. So for a time period, it'll be producing less than the old one. But then it will take off. And it's essentially the same curve as the first one, the one on the left. So the one on the right is almost identical. It'll take off and it will be an S-curve, but with a much higher output over the long period. Now I've got these terms here. The ferment, beginning of a new innovation, the early stages of an innovation. At these stages, the costs are high, the returns are limited, and competition in the market is fierce. So it's struggling. The company is struggling. It introduces a piece of equipment, an innovation to help it to produce something. This is the ferment. It's starting. The takeoff, the technical obstacles have been overcome. The innovation has the capacity to meet the market demands, and rapid growth takes place. So that's the takeoff in the center. The problems have been overcome. The machine is working effectively. There is high output. That's the takeoff. Maturity, the innovation has been fully adopted by society or by the company or by the market and nearing its physical limit. At this stage, the drive is to sustain the market through price reductions and standardization. So the company is at physical capacity. It can't produce more. It's at maturity. The only way it can expand the market is to try and get extra capacity, production capacity elsewhere. It could be that the market itself is at maturity and the company wants to instill further growth in the market, so it may cut the price. But if it itself has not got the capacity to meet the extra demand, then it won't cut the price, obviously. So it's a blend here of two things. A blend of output related to the machine. The machine has now gone into the final phases of its capacity. It's at maturity. It can't produce more. But the market itself may be at maturity as well. The market may be at a stage where it can't take more. Or it could be the market has a lot more capacity. If it has got a lot more capacity, then the organization must now look at increasing production. And it would do that by perhaps replacing this particular piece of machinery with an alternative. And that's what we've got here on the diagram, the jumping from the left S-curve to the right one. The discontinuity referred to as the recycle of the existing innovation. This stage relies on the organization's ability to innovate before the existing innovation discontinues. It's all a matter of timing, you see. They've got a machine which is meeting market requirements. It's producing the output that meets market requirements. But the machine is old, parts are wearing out, it is struggling to stay online, to stay working. Perhaps there's high maintenance cost on the machine. So at this stage, the organization has to decide on getting a replacement. So it gets the replacement and it runs the replacement in tandem with the original one. So the two are running together. The new one now has been phased in and the old one has been phased out. It's been replaced. The opportunity to establish more innovations and technological advancements to restart the product cycle. So we've just simply moved from the left to the right. We've moved from one technology to a new technology. And this new technology is much more productive. You can see it's higher up. It's much more productive than the original one. That's because over time, technology tends to improve and machinery have got more capacity and they're more reliable over a period of time. So the replacement of the original one has to be set against the acquisition of the new one. And a decision has to be made by management as to whether to make that jump, the jump to a new technology. So that's the curve, the way it looks. There is a discontinuity here. And the discontinuity is because the new piece of equipment is not working effectively. It's not working completely. The operators are learning how to use it. Perhaps it's not in the ideal position. Perhaps it's not integrated with the machines around it. So it needs to be worked on. There needs to be experience in using it. And the operators need to learn about the machine. They need to know how to use it in practice, not just read the manual, but know how to use it, know what its capacity is, know what its upsides and its downsides are. Take it as an example. Here we've got, this could be, as it related to marketing, but you can see that marketing drives production because the marketing personnel are feeding back what the market wants. And if it technically can be achieved, then the pieces of equipment that the organization have should be able to produce different types of products. But eventually, the machinery and the equipment the company has will have to be replaced as the market requires new products. I'm going to give a very simple illustration here just to see if we can get this concept. We start with music on record, and then we move to a music player. You can see this idea of music making is taken off, and music storage and use and organization is taken off. And the company that make these type of bits and pieces and equipment, they look for synergy to see if there's something in the first one they can use for the second one. So on the left, they produce records. Well, there's very little, or CDs. There's very little on the CD that could be used on the other one, but the CD would go with the second one. But the equipment that's used to make the CDs may not be directly relevant in making the CD player. So they may have to have a range of equipments. The overall product is music, music organization, music storage. It gets more sophisticated towards the top. And these early ones are starting to be replaced. So now it's moved to a very sophisticated product towards the top. But that's as far as that can go. The technology, perhaps within an organization, now is stretched as far as it can go. It's using whatever equipment it has to try and produce as much of this as it can, but that's it. It's now at its limit. A lot of the internal components in these products may have to be bought in anyway. So the company which started to make CDs originally will end up making perhaps the case, making some of the wiring, and perhaps a few bits and pieces associated with the internals, and a lot of it will have to be bought in, simply because the equipment that they've got is not capable of making that jump. So now they need to decide, do they want to stay in this business? Do they want to further develop it? And what sort of equipment will they need? What sort of innovation will they require? And this is the discontinuity. They have to now think about perhaps moving backwards to move forwards, redesign the products, look for new ideas, new products, and move onwards. And I've just put in two here. Again, MP3 players, and I've just put in an iPhone at the top, because that's the way the market seems to have moved. So the phone has now replaced a lot of what we've got on here. But of course, to produce the iPhone, we need large corporations like Apple or Samsung for the Androids and so on. But we can see that the technology, it picks up, it goes through rapid change, and then it starts to decline. And we can expect that with the iPhone as well. The iPhone may have to change further. We can't imagine how it's going to change, because that is the essence of entrepreneurship. That's not for us to look at in a series of classes like these. But it'll have to change. It can't stay as it is. Otherwise, it'll ossify. It'll get stuck, and new products will eventually come onto the market that will replace it. And they also will have these S-curve relationships. So we move here from a basic technology, that one that fitted into the next one along, CD player. And the CD player was good because it was portable and you could stop it and start it. And if they had a piece of equipment that could produce this and also develop the market, then that was a winner for the business. Later on, they would have to further improve. And then they find that's as far as they can go. What they need to do now is make a big jump and perhaps throw over the earlier products and move to this S-curve on the right, where you start with an MP3 player, a new technology, and much smaller, much more convenient, much more capacity, better performance, and then move on to find something which not just is an MP3 player, but has other functionality, e.g. an iPhone or a Samsung or whatever it is. So in this session, what we've done is we've talked about the S-curve in terms of innovation. We've tried to make the link between the S-curve and marketing. In other words, innovations must be targeted at serving the market. They're not just there for the fun of it. They're not just there to simply keep up with changing technology. The changing technology has to service the market. And the market, of course, is determined by customer expectations and customer needs. And what we have is certain technologies that will have S-curves. They start at one point They will rapidly take off, and then they'll start to decline. And then they will be replaced by new products, which we've got here, which will start at a low level, well, high for that curve, but at the bottom end of the curve, the one on the right, and then rapidly increase until we get very sophisticated products that can do many functions, offer many functions, but also offer the function which we're considering here, which is playing music. So now we have Apple Play, and we have music stored on the phone, and we have music online, and so on and so on. And that's the S-curve. It's a very interesting shape in business because it crops up so often and in so many areas. Well worth considering, well worth looking into. But that's all we're going to deal with here. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.